Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Vince Howie. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting Life Unscripted. We're so grateful to have you here today. You are going to talk about some of the things you at ATS World Wide are doing to really help aviation, general aviation as well as commercial aviation, with taxing and saving on that fuel, which is very important for anyone who's a pilot out there. A good many of our listeners are pilots who are business owners. So they go out there and have meetings. They might fly there via Cirrus or Cessna or Piper or that type of, or any of those type of aircrafts. But you guys can help them as well. But before we go to sharing more about your business and how they help aviation and pilots, how did this all come about? How did ATS Worldwide come about?
Yeah, let me just give you a little background about myself and how I got involved with this and how ATS all came about. So I am 29 years a senior civilian with the United States Air Force. Was what's called a member of the Senior Executive Service, which made me equivalent to a general officer. In the Air Force, they've got civilians and military equivalencies. And I retired. I ran the B-2 bomber program. I've been to Pentagon a couple times, deployed, all kinds of fun stuff. It was a great career. I ran depot maintenance at Tinker, had about 10,000 people working for me there, and then was the director of logistics for Air Mobility Command. So all kinds of fun stuff. I left in 2012. There was an early out, so I took advantage of that and left. And a good friend of mine said, "Hey, General Waggy is leaving the state of Oklahoma. Would you like to come be the aerospace guy?" So I started for the state of Oklahoma, became the aerospace and defense director, working for the governor. And my job was basically to help recruit aerospace companies to come to the state of Oklahoma. And went all over the world. I've done the Paris Air Show, the Farnborough, Singapore. I've been to New Zealand, Australia, just all over the world. Anywhere there's an air show, I would go and represent the state to recruit companies to come to Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So in 2015, I was at the Paris Air Show, and I met this guy. His name was Stan Malinki from Poland. And he had an interesting way to move aircraft around airports. So I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. So being a good recruiter, I'm telling him all the great things about Oklahoma. It's our second largest business. We do $44 billion a year, only behind oil and gas. So I get him to come to the state. I meet him in Washington, D.C., meets Senator Inhofe and all our congressionals up there in D.C. And he looks at Oklahoma and says, "Yeah, this is great. I think I want to come settle and put my business in Oklahoma." He tried to put it in Europe and didn't have a lot of interest for some reason. So,
it's interesting. You think that Europe would be even easier to sell to, being all the landing fees and costs to fly there, that they'd love to have a cost-saving mode there.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, I think it was just the concept. He'd been working on it for 7 years, to be honest. And he doesn't have an aerospace background. He doesn't know the industry. And aerospace is a pretty tight-knit industry, and you've got to understand the lingo and who to go to and rules and regulations. So I think he and I just kind of clicked. Mm-hmm. And so he came to, like I said, to Oklahoma and decided that he would bring his business here. So he offered me a part of the company to help run it. And so I went to the state, to the ethics boards, and they said, "It's no different than owning stock. Go ahead and do it. You can do it on the side part-time." So in 2016, we incorporated and formed our LLC here in the state of Oklahoma. And then we put Oklahoma State University on contract to do the design development work to take this idea and make it a full-fledged system. So we've had up to 5 PhDs working on the program for about 3 years. Wow. And they brought it to the point where we decided on a system, and it's a tracked channel system that runs underneath the taxiway that take aircraft from the runway to the gate and back to the runway. That's great. And so when the aircraft enter the system, they shut their engines off, and it saves fuel, emissions. It's less noise, much safer because we know exactly where the aircraft is going to go. So it eliminates collisions. So all the great things, you know, when you get to do that kind of activity.
Well, you just hit on so many important things. Now, whether the listener listening in happens to be a business owner that has nothing to do with aviation, we all depend on aviation to get our goods, our services, to move around. If you're traveling for business, commercial wise, to have the planes get from one place to another and cost effectively save on gas. I don't think people realize how much fuel goes into just moving the aircraft on the ground, let alone, you know, taking it through the air.
Well, yeah, I asked Dan, I said, so how did you come up with this idea? And he said his very best friend was a 747 pilot, and he was constantly complaining about how much fuel he wasted on the ground during taxi. Well, Stan had hired a couple of Polish aviation engineers that were, when the Iron Curtain fell in '89, the Soviets left in '91, and when they left, at Warsaw, there was a Sukhov helicopter manufacturing factory there. So when they pulled out, a lot of the engineers were Polish. So they weren't going back to Mother Russia. So they stayed there. And he moved his factory out of West Germany back to Poland after the curtain came down in '93. So he hires these 3 Sukhov helicopter engineers, and he gives them that problem. And they come up with this concept that we now call aircraft towing systems.
Wonderful. How does it look for any airports listening in? We have had quite a few, not only pilots, but people in the aviation industry, maybe operations managers listening in and going, how can this help my airport operation? What does it look like? How do you roll it out?
Yeah, so the great thing about this is that you talked about landing fees earlier. So if you think about a commercial aircraft, 80% of the fleets out there are 737s or A320s. And they burn on an average about 9 gallons of fuel per minute during taxi time. The average taxi time in the US is 16 to 27 minutes, depending on the airport. And if you take that 9 gallons per minute times 16 minutes, a lot of these airports will have 200 to 300 up to 800,000 movements per year. Times that, times the $3 or $4 a gallon, it really turns into a huge savings just in fuel savings alone. So what the airports and airport managers can do, the way that we envision this, the way that they'll recoup their cost is they'll charge a landing fee that's roughly half of the fuel savings for that particular aircraft at that airport. So it's a win-win for both the airport and the airlines.
That is awesome. And I would imagine it saves some time, does it not? You mentioned incursions or there used to be sometimes aircrafts bumping into or people on the ground, the truck operations bumping into wings of aircraft we've seen. So this will stop that as well and decrease that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about our system now, we move aircraft the same way we did 100 years ago under their own power. And when an aircraft comes in at a commercial airport, it's typically handed off between 4 different people before it ever makes it to the gate. And so it is a totally manual system. So we are automating this totally manual system. So our system will also optimize the gates. And in Oklahoma State University did some calculations and believe that by optimizing the ground movements, we can increase throughput in airports up to 30% just by automating this manual system that we currently have today.
Yeah, I could totally see how that could make things a lot safer on the ground as well, because with so many people involved, just a miscommunication between 2 people, the ground people and the airplane can totally have some issues and maybe even an accident, which we've seen with a couple of aircrafts having bent wings or Yeah, so this will definitely not only cut cost and fuel, but also safety issues. So it has just hit the market, right? I hear the steel prototype just hit the port in Houston not too long ago. Share how it's starting to roll out and what you see as far as rolling out now. What is the current?
So pre-COVID, right before COVID started, we were at the point with Oklahoma State University that they'd done all the design development work, and it was time to start the prototype. And it was time to put someone on full time. So I've been full time now for almost 2 years. I left the state and working this. So we kind of delayed the prototype probably 6 months because of COVID and getting things in, and all that. But actually, it was probably a blessing because we further refined some of the designs and the details. And we are putting our prototype in the Ardmore Air Park in Ardmore, Oklahoma. It is a former bomber base that has been turned over to the city there. And we will have that in the ground, it looks like probably in the middle of May. And we will start our testing then. I've bought a 727 aircraft, so I'll have a test bird there. We also will probably unveil it to the public in the June timeframe is what we're looking at.
Oh, that's fabulous. Right around the corner. And
Yeah.
I see aviation is starting to really kick off right now. People are getting more comfortable with flying. So this is going to be absolutely perfect. And there's something we didn't mention that's also great for reducing emissions. It's something that's talked a lot about there that's important for a lot of companies. How do we reduce emissions into the air? Yet another thing that your system is really helping with to reduce emissions and collisions at the same time.
Yeah, the other piece of that is noise also. So a lot of the airports have real noise issues. In fact, we were looking at doing a test section at Heathrow in London, and they could not they were trying to put another runway in, and the city voted it down just because of the noise. Mm-hmm. But be that as it may, the emissions that are released are tremendous on the ground. That is a huge target. A lot of the EPA groups out there is the emissions, especially in airports and the noise out there. And once they enter our system, they cut their main engines. And so the emission savings are tremendous. Mm-hmm. The other piece for airport operators that we think is another valuable piece for them is you can take those emission savings and turn them into credits. And then you sell those credits on the open market. There's 4 different broker houses that sell emission credits to companies that are paying penalties to the EPA because they can't meet the standards. And so there's another revenue stream right there is the emission credits that are saved because we shut that engine off.
Yeah, you mentioned something in the noise abatement. I have heard quite a few airports I've visited where they'll have abatement rules on where to take off and where, so you stay away from where the traffic is, where the people are. So yeah, this will also help airport operations and people to realize and pilots to be like, okay, this is one less thing we have to worry about, decreasing the noise, at least while we're on the ground.
Absolutely. My very best friend growing up is a 787 pilot for Delta right now. And I told him about the system and he was so excited. He said, Vince, the scariest time for me is when I'm taxiing around on the ground. He said, I literally try to hang my head out the window sometimes to see my wingtips. And he said, with your system, this is awesome. I can enter into the system, shut my engines down, then I can start doing all my post-flight documentations because you're going to take me right to the gate and I don't have to worry about crashing into anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And tell me how this helps maybe during inclement weather. I'm guessing that will help even more when the weather's a little funky on the ground because some pilots have told me, hey, I have a Cat 3, which for anyone who doesn't know, if you're flying a big aircraft, the heavies, the aircraft flies it down pretty much to the ground. But once you hit the ground and you're on the ground and taxiing, now you have to try to figure out how to fly on the ground. And if it's really inclement, really hard to see, I'm guessing your ATS will really help that as well.
Yeah. So once the aircraft hits the runway, goes to the taxiway, it enters into what we call the tow dolly. And that tow dolly chocks the nose landing gear. And then underground is the pull cart that actually pulls it from one place to another. Because of this system, it is an all-weather system. We could pull aircraft in a foot of snow or an inch of ice on the ground or in pouring weather. And it's an all-weather system. So no more of aircraft sliding off the end of a taxiway into the mud, how you've seen that many, many times. Yeah. And then also we think we can make a de-icing loop and almost like a car wash where you take the aircraft right through the de-icing at the same time.
Awesome. Wow. Now, can this help our smaller business flyers who are traveling in maybe a Cirrus, a Baron? Can it help those aircraft as well or only the big heavies? No,
absolutely. Our initial tow dolly was designed to fit an aircraft that was a A320 747 size all the way down to a regional jet. Those RJs, it just depends on the angle of the chocks to chock the nose landing gear. And a lot of those RJs are similar to business jets. In fact, we're already in the design phase right now to make a smaller version of it. I believe that we'll have 3 versions because not every airport has 747s and A320s going in it, or A380s going in and out of them. So we're going to have probably a large, medium, and a small version. And the small version will be targeted right at business jets for sure. And probably will even fit some smaller aircraft too. And then we'll start transitioning probably into the general aviation also.
Yeah. And this will be great. Anyone listening in who happen to be like, well, I don't really fly planes, so it's not a problem for me. But I see what's going to happen in the future with this wonderful technology. They'll be able to decrease cost in operations for flying the aircraft because they won't have to waste as much fuel on the ground. Hence, hello, passengers, you pay less.
I really have thought that was my first thoughts is, ticket prices should really decline. And everyone was saying, no, that's up to the airlines. They'll decide, but their expenses will be less. Costs will be less. And I think that that's one of the key things in going forward with our aviation industry right now. Because of COVID and because flying has taken such a hit over this last year, I think they're going to be looking for new innovative ways and green technologies. We're green technology because we use electric carts to move aircraft. In fact, what's really spurred us on is we were at a trade show in San Diego. It's been almost 2 years now because of COVID, where we had always touted the system as being modular, that you could buy, put one gate in or one taxiway in and then add on to it. And so I had 22 airports, small little airports, come up to me and say, can we just buy the pushback portion of your system? The EPA is killing us to get rid of these tugs and tow dollies and things that are diesel powered and gas powered because they put emissions out, they drop oil and gas on the tarmac. And so we went back to Oklahoma State University and developed this curve where we can push an aircraft back and flip it the same direction every time if it comes in at plus or minus 3 degrees. So what that did is we initially targeted 34 airports, which were major hubs for the entire system. But when you start looking at small airports that want to have an electric pushback system, now it opens the aperture to over 200 airports. And so that's what our prototype is just for the pushback system. And then probably in a year or so, we'll have the entire system.
Well, this is fabulous. Such great technology on the horizon and some of it already here ready for operations to use. Where can people find out more if they want to get it installed today? Where do they find out more and get it installed?
Probably the very best thing is to contact me, and I'm glad to give you my contact information. We have a new website that will probably go live I'm hoping next Monday. The current website's not the greatest, but we'll have a brand new one up, and then I can send you the website information. So I apologize. The best thing is to call me. I'd be glad to give you my phone number. If you want it over the air, I can even do that.
Yeah, do that. In case someone listening in tonight just wants to give you a holler during the week before that comes up, I'll have your page up later today. But what we can do is I can update with the new website when it becomes live in the week.
I appreciate that. So my email is vince.howie, Vince.Howie @atswwco.com. So it's Vince.Howie at ATS World Wide Company.com. And my phone number is 405-694-9861. And I encourage anyone to contact me, even if you just want more information or questions, or I'm excited to talk to anyone about this.
You betcha. Well, I am so grateful for what you guys are doing out there to make aviation safer, cleaner, and to save dollars. We definitely need that. Aviation's taken a hit, and I'm very grateful to you guys. So thank you again, Vince Howie, for coming to Savvy Broadcasting this evening.
Christina, I appreciate you having us on the air, and you guys take care and fly safe.
Absolutely.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.